Hey guys, welcome back. Today's video is going to be my March, April, and May wrap up. Now I was doing good. I did my January and February wrap up, but I did not edit the February or put it out yet. So it's all gonna go up around the same time. In March, I did read 11 books. In April, I read 5. And in May, I read 9 books. Now, if you see my March TBR, I did have this thing going on with myself where I was supposed to read all the books on my TBR before I could purchase more books. The first book I ended up reading in March was In the Holidays. Now, I ended up giving that book 5 stars. Me personally, I don't have a lot of expectations when it comes to romance books. If it feels genuine, or like if the romance makes you smile, then I really love the book. So this book follows this girl who her parents and their friends go to this cabin every year for Christmas. One of like the friend's son she has like a crush on, but they're like much older now. Her crush ends up having a brother, and something happens between them during this particular Christmas, and she feels like she's messed her chance up with the older brother, and they're getting ready to leave. But once they leave the cabin, she ends up getting thrown into like a time loop, and she feels like it's the universe giving her a second chance basically to get things right with the bigger brother. Now, why did I read this book in March? Because I actually wanted to read it around Christmas time, but Libby didn't have it available. The next book I ended up reading was Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter. Now, I gave that book 5 stars. I don't know if I be messing up because I be listening to these like thrillers as audiobooks, and some of this stuff be getting like intense, and I just be sitting there and I just be like, well, that went somewhere I didn't expect it. Now, I do think this was like another disturbing, like when I put out what is a disturbing book, that was one of the books that was recommended to me. This book follows Claire, who is celebrating her getting out on probation, and the night that they're celebrating, her husband ends up getting murdered. And when they have the funeral and stuff, like that, finding these videos on her husband's computer. Now, these ain't no home videos, right? These little videos was something different, and this kind of sends her on a spiral to figure out like what's going on. And we do get different perspectives throughout this book because she does have a sister, and we do hear from her side as well. And in this town, as always with a thriller, there is this young woman who is missing. So that book, I just wanted to listen to it nonstop. I could not put that book down. Like I fell in love with the story, and you know, it keeps you on your toes literally until the end of the book. Like 5 stars. Now, the next book I ended up reading was Rock, Paper, Scissors. Now, this is a really hyped up book. Gave it 4 stars, but I'm kind of between 3.5 or 4. Rock, Paper, Scissors is about like this married couple who goes to this cottage because they're having like marital issues, and they're there to like solve, like the therapist told them like, you know, get a getaway, go ahead and solve things out. What he doesn't know is the wife has been like writing him letters every year on their anniversary and hasn't shared them. Now, I thought like this was a genuinely good idea. Like I might do that in real life, like every year write a note, because then you see like the growth and where things change or where things went wrong. But when they're in this cottage, different stuff keeps happening, and it do got twists to it. The twists do get you, but like when I was reading it and trying to talk about it in a way where to make it make sense, it was confusing. Like you honestly have to just read the book to understand, because the twisty's twisty, okay? Now, the next book I ended up reading was Cryptocurrency 101. I ended up giving that 4 stars. You know, when people are talking about expanding your wealth and, learn about like getting financially free. This topic is one of the topics people talk about. So I thought, because I just hear the word like, yeah, you need to get into cryptocurrency is this and that, and it's like, but I don't know nothing about it. So I just picked the book up because it was like an introduction. It did teach a lot. It did help you just to learn like what different things are, like NFTs, what are the pros and cons. So that's why I ended up giving this book 4 stars. The next book I ended up reading was Dancing in the Dark, and I do have a physical copy of that book, but to be honest, I need new bookshelves because my books are falling out. Like, I have a very small one that you guys can see in my videos, and then I have like my old furniture from when I was a kid, and that has like bookshelves on it, but to me it's not aesthetically pleasing anymore. And that's also why I haven't been filming, because I'm trying to find like the right look to film my videos. So I don't know where it's at. I think I just tucked it in there, and I don't feel like going through this all right now to find it. But I ended up giving that book 5 stars. Now, this book is like basically the shadow side of relationships, and it has a lot of information and just stuff to be aware of when you're in an intimate relationship. It does have like a passage in the front of the book that says like, don't read this book if you're under 30, but I feel like it has so much wisdom and people aren't aware of. And this was really like what I really enjoyed about it, because this book was so impactful and like really hitting you with like a lot of good stuff. I was able to read it with my partner, and we were able to like go through things and discuss it and have conversations about what was in the book. And I was just like, what made the reading experience for me even better, because it was stuff that I wasn't even aware of that like I was doing, but the book brought light to it. Not only did it bring light to something I was doing, it also was giving me an understanding why I was doing it. And so, you know, we like that. We like stuff like that. So I give that one 5 stars. Now, the next book I ended up reading was Love is Sweet by Nikki Grace. And I ended up giving that book three stars. This follows a stripper whose aunt is ill, and so she makes like a vow to her aunt like she's gonna stop stripping and figure something else out, because she only really did it to get through school. And then she like meets this dude, end up falling like in love and starting a relationship, and that's basically what the first book is about. Now, it is like a 3-book series, and I read the other 2 in May, but I'm just gonna go ahead and talk about all of them because it's like I don't feel like doing all that. So the first book, what I just said is what it is, and it leaves off on a cliffhanger. So that's why I couldn't really give it a high rating, because it was just like, I don't know, like it wasn't much to it. Like, you just see the development of the characters and like where the relationship is going, to the point where it was just like, these are really short books. I don't think any of them are even 200 pages. So it's like, for me personally, I don't feel like she had to make it a 3-part series. She could have just made it like 2 books and it would have been enough. So the second book just rolls into the like it's more like expands on the relationship, where she's still trying to transitioning from not being a stripper and having all this quick money, and then like trying to navigate her relationship and understand like, does she even really know this person, because they met and things did happen very quickly with them. And when we get to the third book, so the second book is called Love is Sour and the third book is called Love is Salty. And I gave the third book and the fourth book 4 stars, because it does like get better with more like details and it makes you want to read. So after it expands on the relationship in the second book, by the time we get to the third book, it was just a whole bunch of, it was a hot mess. It was messy. It was really messy. Definitely. So I would check the series out because it was a quick and sweet, easy read for me. Now, the next book I ended up reading after that was As Good as Dead, which is the last book in the A Good Girl's Guide to Murder series. And I ended up giving that one 4 stars. I liked the third book way more than the second book. For me, the second book kind of was just like the first book with things, with just different people. You know what I'm saying? And with the third book, she kind of felt like somebody was out to get her personally, and she couldn't understand why. And even though like she didn't know if she was on edge because of stuff she experienced from the second book, or was somebody really just watching her. and she's trying to express this to the police and stuff like that. So we see like all this unfold of like what's really going on, and that's why I was just like, wow, that was a really good book. And one thing I definitely like about the series is how everything comes full circle, and that's all I'm gonna say. Now the next book I ended up reading was Gemini Rising. This was one of the books that was in my, my TBR. I think on this list, The Dancing in the Dark was, and the Gemini Rising was definitely one of them. So at least I read two, right? So with Gemini Rising, it was one of my rereads, and I just couldn't remember the in-between details, and I wanted to read the book again before I gave it a genuine review. So Gemini Rising basically follows this woman whose father and brother end up dying in a car accident when she's young, and then her mom sends her away to go live with this man, but she can't understand like why her mom would do that, because then eventually you see how this man ends up abusing her. Now we get to see Gemini as an adult and how she's navigating the relationship she has between the man that she got sent to when she was a kid, and now how she's trying to find love in her life, because the stuff that this woman had to go through was very tragic. And I've like always remembered that about the book, like especially the ending when we find out what happened and why her mother did the things that she did. It really left the impact to where I can like recite the story 3 years later and still know what happened. But we do get a bit of romance, because one of her bosses at the company she works for, they kind of build an attraction with each other, but of course from her, she's been traumatized and been through a lot, so it's hard for her to love. So we see all of that, and I ended up giving that book 4 stars. The next book I ended up reading was The Power of Zero, and this is basically just like an investment book, how to not pay. Like you enter the zero tax bracket when you're in retirement. I gave this book 3 stars. This was just to learn. Maybe because like I'm not there yet. It is giving me like mindfulness about certain things, because at one point in time we're going to have to retire. It talks about Roth IRAs, and just stuff like that. One thing I didn't know was when you in a certain tax bracket and you don't get no social security, and not only do you not get social security, they tax the money that you have for retirement. What? Like, that don't make sense. But that book gonna teach you how to dodge all of that. If that's where you at in life and you need to figure out how to get through that, read that book. One thing that I'm sharing with the book, open you up a Roth IRA. I think that's what it's called. Yeah, now. Good idea. Now, the next book I ended up reading after that one was It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover. Of course, I'm not going to rate it. It will be one of the books featured in my book review, so wait till that one. Next book I read after that was another investment book, which was called The Investment Answer. I can't remember too much about it. When I was reading it, I realized like it had a lot of information in it, and it wasn't gonna be information I could just recite and remember like with certain things. So I started taking notes on it, and I ended up giving it 3 stars. I really can't remember too much about this one. I can't tell you what I learned from it. All the books I've read in March. Now we're gonna go books I read in April. I don't know why the books I read in April was so short. It was my birthday month, so I guess I just said, hey, I don't want to do that. But is it 1, 2, 3, 4? Oh no, it was 5. I'm like, I thought I read 5 books. But so the first book I ended up read was The X-Hex, which is like another raved and hyped up book. I only gave that book 3 stars because it just was not what I expected to be, honestly. Now, when they say like it's this witch who have this relationship with this man and he puts a hex on him and they're trying to figure out how to break the hex because it ends up cursing the whole city. I didn't know when she put this hex on him they were like kids, and then it transfers over to when they were adults, and I guess the hex was still on him and they were unaware. Well, no, I wouldn't even say kids, they was like teenagers, they were just young. And so I don't know, it wasn't a bad read, so maybe 3.5, 3.5. One thing about the book though that I genuinely thought was funny, they have like this black cat and it was a curse was going on, and so now the cat is able to talk, and the only thing he keeps saying is like treats, treats. And I feel like if that was my cat, if he can talk, that's all he gonna say all day. Honestly. And so the next 2 books were more books I read by Colleen Hoover, which was confessed in November 9th. Those were April books. So the next book I read was The Psychopath, A True Story. Now. Before I review this book, I am no way in any shape or form criticizing what the person went through in the book. This is criticizing the book alone, not the true events and stories, because I'm sorry that woman had to endure that and she had to go through those things. But as a book, this book only gets 2 stars. Now, when I read The Psychopath, The True Story, I thought this book was going to be like more so on the following type of aspect of a psychopath. And if you're not familiar with the following, it's just like a serial killer caught series. It got Kevin Bacon in it. I really liked that series. It was really good. But well, why do I want to read a book like that? But it was just a true story. I was trying to get in the brain. I was trying to see more of what was going on, right? No, this book has to follow this woman who basically ends up getting into like a real woman, real relationship. And he's basically like a bigamist. He was married to other women, having multiple relationships with other women, and basically having a bunch of kids. And he was conning people out of money and just all this stuff. And it's like a real thing. I think this happened in London, and he came over to the States. He was actually arrested there, and then he started making more babies in America. Whole lot. Now, for me personally, why this book just wasn't good for me is because the fact that the author, maybe the actual, because she has another book called The Bigamist, might be better than this one, because this one, she just repeats what happens over and over and over again. And I was listening to this as an audiobook, and I was at work and I just needed something to listen to. That's why I was able to finish it. But like, I didn't need to read it. Like, you could have read the first chapter and understood the whole book. Like, and it was one good chapter in there though, like when she talks about like her understanding of everything, or like why she was attracted to psychopaths, or like just how her trauma shaped her and stuff like that. Like, that was really good, informative, and I really liked that. But the overall book, it just was not for me. Now, the next book I read was another financial book, which is called The Black Girl's Guide to Financial Freedom. I did give this book 4 stars. I genuinely liked this book because it had a lot of insight, and it gave like different reasons why they were saying what they were saying. One thing that stood out to me in this book was basically how she was talking about how like people go into debt to get cars, when cars just like sit there, and you basically don't even be driving the car, but like you have the car and you take a loan out for it, and the value goes down from the car. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it don't make sense. Just saying how that's not like a very good financial decision to make, but you know, to each his own. And those are all the books that I read in April. I did read 9 books in May. You know, I was coming back. You know, I read 11 in March, didn't read that many in April, and I tried to push through more. I actually ended up getting like the last book I read out on like the 31st. I was like, I want to finish this so I can include it in my May wrap up, because I try to stick to as true as possible. Like, even if I finish the book, like I started it in May and I didn't finish it till like June 1st, I'm included in like the June wrap up. That's just something I do. But the first book I ended up reading in May was called The Daughters of the Lake. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. Now, this book was a really slow burn. It was really slow, but I really liked how the author left no corners untouched. Like, there's nothing in the story that you don't know. You know how some, like, she tells you people's thoughts, like even if that's not what she's like talking about at the time, she's gonna include like that other person who's just affected or like in the situation perspective. And I just really appreciated that. Now, at one point the book did start to get a bit predictable for me, but I still liked it. I genuinely did. It just has to deal with this woman who ends up having this dream of like this woman's body being found in the lake, and when she wakes up, her father is actually finding a body in the lake, and the woman has a baby in her arm. And so she just knew that her and the baby were there, and now people are trying to look at her as a suspect. Like, how did you know this was going on? Now she kind of gets thrown into finding out what's happened with this woman. Like, who is she? Because she just got clothes on from like 100 years before, and they just trying to figure out what happened to this mystery woman. And the girl who finds the body does come from like a wealthy family, and their family does have like a bit of history and heritage with that community and stuff. But I did predict the ending and I knew what was going on, so but it was still good. Now, the book I ended up reading was The Invisible Girl by Lisa Jewell. Now, I'm the type of person, if I'm gonna read your work more than once, if I don't like a book that you put out there, I'm just gonna assume like maybe this book is just not my cup of tea. So I'm not a person who reads something once by an author and puts the book down. I'm gonna read more books by you. So I read her other book, which I wasn't really much of a fan of, but people really like this author, so I thought I'd give her another try. This book in particular follows a young woman who basically ends up becoming obsessed with her therapist after he discontinues their sessions. And she like stalks him and basically tries to find more stuff out about his life. And there's also women being attacked around town. This story wasn't the story for me, because that's why I did give it 3 stars. It wasn't a bad book. It wasn't nothing really I felt like anything could have been better or done in a different way. I just genuinely just was like, okay. And I was listening to it as an audiobook as well, so it was just like but I did like it than the other book. But it was just like I don't know if things just get drawn out for me or what. Like, I can't even really say why I didn't like the book. I just know it's not a favorite. The next book I ended up reading was called The Replacement Wife by Darby Kane. Now, her debut book came out last year, which was The Pretty Little Wife, and I really liked that book. I gave that book 4 stars. I was really like, wow, this is your first book and you did that. Like, that was great. So of course I wanted to pick this book up and read it, right? This book get 2 stars. I'm sorry. It just wasn't it wasn't it at all. Like, and I was trying to read it because I had it through Libby. It was just about to be given back to the library because I wasn't reading it as quickly as I was supposed to. And so I had to actually get it read back from like wait. I was trying to hurry up and read it. I just couldn't get into the story. I couldn't do it. And I probably should have just DNF'd it. But once it came available again, I was just like, you know what? Now I want to know. Now I want to know what's going on. And I finished it, but I wasn't left like how I felt with her first book at all. This book basically follows this wife whose brother-in-law's fiance ends up going missing, but he also has a history with the woman in his life where things have happened to him. So now she got bells in her head. Like, ain't no way all this different stuff is happening to your spouse. It's like, this is not possible. I don't know what's going on. And she just started not to trust him no more. And that's all I can say without giving away too much. Honestly, that's all I can say. But the idea, it started off going somewhere. The in between, it didn't end too well for me. The book I ended up reading after that was Brome Crier's Moon. Now, this book I actually picked up in like January, and I was listening to an audiobook and I couldn't really get into it. But it got sent back to the library, and I just ended up, deciding to pick it up again because I was like, hey, I started it. I'm trying to do this thing now. All the books that I've started, let me finish it so I can, 1, read more books, 2, start new books, because I am a person who pick a book up if I'm an emotional reader. Like, off my mood, it'd be books that I re-pick back up and realize, oh, I do like this book, but I put it down too soon. So this is one of the books I had to read back up because I ended up giving this book 3.5 stars. Now, it's really hard to describe what this book is about. It has to deal with like a group of women who, I don't know if they're like what they are. Like, I don't know if it was specified if they were like witches or fairies. I think they might be like fairies, but they have to like sacrifice men because that's something to do with what they got going on. And it just, I don't know how to explain this book. I really don't. One thing about this book for me, why it does not get 5 stars for me, because how I'm just trying to explain like what they are and stuff, I feel like it doesn't, this book has so much history, it kind of almost feels like it needs a prequel for that world, because it's just so in-depth, and it's like they're trying to explain to you how, like, why they do certain things, why having a story going on. I just feel like the world within itself is its own story separately, and then like the young woman in this particular book who like messed up the ritual and they gotta go get it back and stuff like that, is a separate story within itself. So if I would have had, like, if it's a first book before this book that explained the world, this book gets 5 stars. Without that, it gets 3.5. Next book I ended up reading was Dr. Sebi's Healing Diabetes book. If you're not aware, I am a diabetic. I am trying to learn ways to manage my diabetes and control my sugars better. This book told me about different herbs, different ways to eat to help put my body in a healing state so my blood sugars can be lower. About different things that I just need to do as a diabetic to live my best life healthy, okay? That book got 5 stars. Now the next book is like more so a spiritual book, and it's called What's in Your Womb, and I gave that 5 stars as well. I know in my other hauls you guys can see like I have a lot of yoni wellness books, and it's a reason for that, and I'm trying to learn different things about that space and how to heal that part of myself as well. And that book definitely does it. One thing that the author really does is give you her own experiences and why it's important to heal your yoni, or just what different energies can be there that affects your yoni and being able to create and live the life that you want to live. So that one was really good. It also has a lot of exercises in there. It's also on Kindle Unlimited. So if you have Kindle Unlimited, definitely pick it up and read it. It's not gonna, this is a book that needs to be read, okay? And the last book I read in May is also spiritual. You see towards the end, I was shifting mind states here. And it's called The Mastery of Love, 5 stars. Now, I do have vlogs coming up because I did like a weekly reading vlog. And I believe I mentioned this book multiple times. Now, this book, he's just a wise man. He really is. He did the 4 agreements, and I like that book. That's definitely going to be a reread for me eventually, but I don't know who has that book right now. I lent it out to either like my sister or my brother's fiance. I don't know who's reading it right now, but I would definitely read that book again, because it just, he just has a way of making things make sense. And it's basically, in this particular book, talks about like why loving the right way is important and how to love the right way, because so many of us love with conditions that we forget that we're here to love unconditionally and do things from the place of your heart instead of having so much suffering behind what we do. Because like he talks about like how fear is bad in love and just so much. This book, I feel like in a way can help you better to understand yourself and the ways you love and how to transform into a better state of loving for yourself and everyone else. Now, those are all the books I read so far. I told myself I wasn't going to do like quarterly reviews. I wanted to do like a month to month, but I was in the mood for filming, and I'm gonna get back into it because those are some great books. And how many books is that? 11 plus 5, 16, 4. I read 25 books, and that's literally about a chunk of all the books I want to read this year, because like I want to read 60 books and I'm already at like 41. That's something. I was at 41 books like last year in September. So I look like I'm about to exceed and excel past the 60, but I gotta read some more books so I can talk about them. So until next time.